Toonkel, and I'm a production designer who worked on Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. Um, I live in Los Angeles and go between here and New York, where I'm from. And as a production designer, I'm responsible for everything that you see on camera except for the actors and what they're wearing.
So tell me a little bit about that. I mean, because it sounds to me like what you're doing is world building. And how does one go about the process of building a world like Marcel the Shell?
Yeah, so I think that's what's really exciting about being a production designer. And as you mentioned in our preamble, I think a lot of people don't know what we do. And I think that's actually because what we do is so vast, and really like when you see a movie and you're really inspired by the environment you are in and the world that was created, that it has so much to do with the production designer. In terms of Marcel the Shell, a lot of it, you know, we have these amazing shorts to sort of base the feature on, and that already kind of created an incredible world with like certain rules. And so with the feature, we really strove to like maintain that and expand upon it. And there was a lot to think about in terms of like the micro world of Marcel and his community, and then the macro world of humans and the world that we inhabit, and sort of how to see how those two worlds like respond and reflect one another. So that was sort of like the overarching thing, and then it became very, you know, detailed and technical from there.
You know, it's really cool. I read an interview you did where you were talking about kind of navigating the notion of an Airbnb and the kind of beigeness and blandness of the world. And, you know, it's funny because as I was watching the film, the ways in which that interplayed with the characters and the animation and the even color of the shell, right? How much time do you spend just thinking about color?
You know, I think for me, like, I love color. I mean, that's one of the reasons I think I do what I do. Like, if you look in the other side of my room or behind me, like I don't discriminate. I love every single color. But I think because of that, I think maybe there are some designers who approach things very much like we're going to use all red here or something like that. But I very much approach it organically. It's very much like, this makes sense for what this thing is, or, you know, oh, this would be a fun pop of color because I found this thing that looks this certain way. But I try not to be too didactic about that. I actually think like having been a film student really shied me away from that, because I feel like a lot of people, when they're learning how to make films, that's the main thing they think about when it comes to design, is like, oh, I have to be really limited in my palette, or I have to do this, you know, specific thing with color. But I think when it can come more from the other ideas you have, I think it's much stronger and feels more relatable to our world, because the real world has so many tones and shades to it.
That's so cool. It's so much fun. And, you know, I find myself wondering, okay, so at what point in the process, you know, there's a script written there, they decide to go into production. At what point in the process do you come in, and what role do you play all throughout? How does it work?
Yeah, so it varies a little bit project to project, but typically I come on in the prep phase once the movie is already greenlit, the script's already done. And I'm sort of there to take what's on the page and what the director has in mind and make it real. And so there's like a lot of steps to that process. There's obviously just sort of like the phase of a lot of conversation, talking about the things that are important to them, what I've noticed in the material, things, ideas that it's brought about for me. And a lot of times that's like a, you know, me putting together an initial like lookbook of images and other movies, places, characters, things that like feel like they kind of speak to the world that I'm thinking of, and then sort of having the director look at that and give me feedback. So it's constantly like a back and forth. And then I like to do a lot of research, like even for a movie like Marcel, where there is sort of this fantastical element to it. I think the more that things can kind of be based in reality, and like we have something that we're sort of pulling from in the real world, like the stronger and more depth there is to things. So that's a huge part of it. And then there's just the really technical, like, how do we actually make it happen? How do we get all these things? How do we change the color of this room or change this wall? So it kind of goes sort of like in Marcel, it's like goes from macro of big ideas, and then like, how do we actually make them happen? So that's the interesting thing about production design, is it's kind of this incredible balance between being really creative and open, and then really like, I have to get this done in a month, and how am I going to do it with this amount of money and this amount of people? So it's very much like, I feel like there are other creative pathways that aren't such a back and forth between like managerial, like logistical skills and like creative skills. And this is really like 50-50.
Okay, so I'm going to throw you in a wayback machine a little bit right now. Okay. So I try and do as much research as I can when I come into an interview, so when I'm prepared. And I noticed not only that, you mentioned you come from a filmmaker background, but I was trying to dig into Fashion Kills a little bit. And I also noticed that the editor on Fashion Kills has a very familiar name. Can you talk about having been a filmmaker and the relationships and how things have evolved over time?
Yeah, well, I still consider myself a filmmaker. It's a huge part of my practice that I sort of oscillate between designing films and then making my own work. And yes, so Dean, the director of Marcel, was my peer at NYU Film School. And we didn't really know each other until the end, when my friend recommended me to use him as the editor on the thesis film that I directed there. And I just thought Dean was such like an amazing person, and like such a creative mind, and like amazing storyteller. And so after we worked together on that, I always hoped we would get to work together again. And then it just sort of happened beautifully to work together on this.
That's fantastic. One of the things in my day job, I teach film and television production classes over at the university here at Purdue Fort Wayne. And one of the things I always like to tell my students is, you got to remember, in this industry, when the credits roll, there's never just one name. And so, how important do you think the building of those kinds of relationships is to the process and the product that we create for the screen?
I think it's the most important thing. Like, I always say, like, kind of when I'm designing, like, that process is sort of like dating. It's like you have to find somebody that you really want to spend a lot of time with, and that you also are going to put time into building a relationship of trust, because that is, filmmaking is a really hard process. It's a really hard job. It's comparable to almost nothing else, maybe like going to war, but like it's just full of so many stresses and so many X factors, that if you, no matter what position you are on a film, if you like haven't built like a team that you feel you can trust and that you respect, it's almost impossible to like create something worthwhile. And I think that's what's so remarkable about this movie, is like everybody who was involved cared so much about the project, and like really showed up to do the best job they could do with very little. Like my art department crew had so many challenges and big asks, and like I was really fortunate that the people on it were, just really committed to trying to make the film as good as they could. But, I think there's also a lot of pressure for people to do that, as if they were in a vacuum. But, I think it's also really important to like respect one another and try and like let your crew or your team live balanced lives, have, family, friends, like pets, other things besides what they're working on. And I feel like um, that's a really important part of being in this industry, at least for me too, is to just try and like balance my life a bit so that when times are really stressful or lots being asked of me, I have more in my life than just that, and like I have a support network.
I'm so glad that you're able to talk about that, because I think that, it's such an important part of this art form that, we often sometimes, like even my use, and I apologize at all for not talking about you as a filmmaker, because obviously you are, and everybody who works on the film is. And so, it's one of those things where, can you talk to me a little bit about your journey, how you get from film school to being a, production designer?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's really complicated because, when I got out of school, like there isn't a rubric to doing this. It's not like some other career paths. And especially when I got out of school, like being a female writer director was like, a 1 in a million thing. And it's not that much better now, but it's getting slightly better. And so, I was like, I have to pay my rent and I also want opportunity. So I started, even while I was in school, designing friends' films, because I was like, this is like a part of filmmaking I'm really passionate about. And I think I have, strength at. And so it was the kind of thing when I got out of school of just like, can I work on your movie? Can I work on your movie? And, I made a lot of mistakes because it's really hard. And I think that's the biggest thing I tell people is just, if you want to be a creative professional, like literally the number one thing is just don't give up, because if you don't give up and you keep trying, something will happen. It might not look exactly as you had envisioned it, but like you can forge a path doing this. You just have to keep trying, and it's like keep trying different things till something's working. And so when I got out of school, I was doing that, and then I was in New York at the time full time and trying to just PA or assist on bigger projects so I could learn. There's so much to learn, and I think like, looking back as like a film student, I felt like I knew a lot. And then you realize like, now I've been doing this for a long time and I'm still like, there's so much for me to learn. Like these are hard jobs where you're expected to be like, have like the craziest toolbox and skill set. So I'm rambling a little bit, but basically I did that for a while in New York. And then I decided to go to graduate school out in California. And there I did both scenic design and studio art. And so like I've been doing in my professional career path, I sort of oscillated between making my own work and working with others. And then since I've been out of graduate school, it's just been like slowly working my way up. And I very much kind of worked my way up through indie world rather than like, I have friends that are also production designers that have more gone the route of like being an art director, assistant art director on like really big movies. But for me, I always was like, I think my strength is more being at the head of a team. And so I've sort of like carved my way out in that way.
Very cool. So if I were thinking about being a production designer and wanting to be in the production design world, are there certain films that kind of with their design inspire you, like certain films that I should go to watch to kind of get a sense of this kind of world building?
Yeah, I mean, I think my answer is a little less standard. I feel like you should watch every kind of movie. I think the most disheartening thing to me about being a production designer is when I tell people and they say, "Oh, do you love Wes Anderson?" And my response is always like, "Actually, every single movie you've seen, even some documentaries have a production designer." And like, I think what is so amazing about production design to me is often how invisible it is, because that means it's good. So like a really gritty movie that looks like real life, that actually took a ton of work. You just can't see it. And so I think if you really are interested in being a designer or in a filmmaker or any kind of artist, it's really useful when you watch anything to like sit back and say, oh, how did they do that? Like, what was their budget? Was this mostly locations? Like, I think the more you can kind of train yourself to see how things are made, I think that's really the strength. You can read tons of books or take classes where they'll tell you to watch all these classic films with amazing production design. But I actually think many of the films that are never mentioned are the best ones to watch. Like, trying to think of a good example. Yeah, I mean, I guess to me, it's like anything that's a good movie, like, Inside Llewyn Davis, or like a really simple movie that like isn't even period, that just feels like visceral. That was someone's like intention and creation. So I
Yeah,
could talk about it for a long
much
time.
like comedies, good production design that isn't in a period piece oftentimes gets overlooked.
Oh,
And
100%. But I think that I've also tried to train myself because, like, Marcel is probably the first movie I've ever worked on that anybody has like taken notice of my, skill as a production designer. But it's like there's a lot of movies that I've done before that like I've sort of had to like embrace for myself. Well, I'm kind of glad nobody noticed because it means I did my job right. Like if you notice that the room looked really overly designed and it's supposed to feel like a relatable movie, then something's wrong. Like I hate when I watch a like rom-com or something and everyone looks like they live in a house that like an interior designer created. Like that's not my job, you know?
yeah.
So yeah, I think that that's something that I really try to like promote because I feel passionately about it, and I feel like artists in general are like pretty overlooked. And so I think the more that like if you're interested in the arts and you want to pursue them, or even if you just want to be like a culturally aware person, the more you can like try to think about what went into something. I also think it just like deepens the experience for you.
So then I have to ask because you kind of started to go there. What are some of the favorite things that you've done? What are some of your favorite projects that you've worked on? What should I go watch that it gets a sense of your design?
Um, Good question. Well, I have another movie coming out in a couple weeks called Emily the Criminal with Aubrey Plaza.
It will
That
be
is like,
here in a few weeks. We're showing it. So please
oh,
tell us what
great.
we're in for.
Well, this is a movie I feel really passionately about. It's a thriller about student debt, which I think probably a lot of your attendees can relate to.
The
Um,
university professor knows nothing about that.
and I feel like it's really exciting actually that both of these films are coming out sort of around each other because they're so different. Like that movie is much more shot like, a Safdie brothers movie, or like, Heat or something like that. And the goal was to sort of show like a really different version of Los Angeles than we typically see in a lot of movies, and something that like if you're someone who's lived here and struggled, that like you might really relate to. And a movie like that, I think it's really interesting if you come and see it in a couple weeks, because like half of our locations in that movie, if not more, were completely empty when we got them. And like hopefully you don't even notice that, but that's like all the work that we did to really build a world that I think feels very real, and you would sort of just like not even think about it. So that's a project I'm really excited about. Um, I did like a movie that I think is kind of doing an interesting like distribution plan. I think it's coming out different places in the next couple months, called Give Me Pity. That was like really different, where we shot everything on a sound stage. It's supposed to feel like a late 70s like TV musical special, because it feels very theatrical, and I've like worked in the theater, so it was exciting to sort of like pull from that. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff, but those are my recent things I'm excited about.
So when will we get to see the writer director come back?
Well, I kind of have two projects I'm working on in tandem. I also, so basically a lot of my personal practice over the past number of years has shifted more into the art world, and performance art. And so within that, I started learning magic, and I have a one-woman magic show that I am about to do in Denmark in a couple weeks.
That is amazing. That is so cool.
And my goal is to sort of tour that around. It's still sort of like slightly in development, but it's really exciting. It's called Magic for Animals, and it's about, you know, how people treat animals and how we can sort of look at that as a way to unpack how we treat each other. And then I have a script that I've been working on for a while. That's a feature that I want to direct. And I've sort of been balancing these two projects. So I'm hoping when I come back from Denmark, I can try and bang out a new draft of that. But I've been putting my efforts more into my magic show and percolating on my script. But hopefully my goal is to make the movie in the next few years.
You know, as I was reading things and doing my research, I noticed that, you know, social justice is a big part of your work and how you talk about yourself. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about that and how it plays a role in what you do.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that has been like one of the reasons that I've always wanted to be an artist, is to do something that I feel like has impact and like that can help improve the ways that, you know, we treat each other and animals and the world. And so I do my best. I'm not perfect, but I do my best to really embody that with all I do. I try really hard to hire people like that are from diverse backgrounds. I try to really focus on hiring queer people, women, and people of color. And you know, I hope more people do that, because even with everything going on, like in our country over the past couple of years around race and diversity, film sets are still very white and very male. And I think that people don't try hard enough to look for new talent until it's very easy, because film stuff comes up so quickly, to just be like, oh, these are the first few numbers in my phone. But I think it's on us. If you're someone who's in a position of power to hire other people, it's on you to help make that change. So I try my best, and like I'm always looking for more resources on how to be better about that and how to find new people. So I hope that also universities and different institutions make more programming for that, and more lists and things like that of talent from diverse places. Yeah, and then like something like Emily the Criminal was just a really exciting project to me. Like when it came my way, I had been canvassing and campaigning for Bernie Sanders for like a long time, and I was so disappointed when he like lost, and was feeling really defeated. And I was like, oh wow, here's like a movie that I feel like promotes some of the things that I believe in terms of like how our economic system is so rigged against pretty much everybody
Yes.
except for the 1%. And so I think too, like one of the things that's exciting about getting further along in my career is just being really picky about what I do next. Like I don't want to work on a project that doesn't feel like it's a part of like my belief system. And so that's exciting. Like I feel like I've waited a long time to get there. So yeah, thank you for asking that question.
No, it's wonderful, and I love the variety of paths you've taken to art. And so, I almost hate to make you pick amongst your children, but like, what are your favorite things that you do, or what are your favorite parts about your job?
Um, well, to me, it's like I've always like since I was little, I feel like I've been sort of interdisciplinary, which has always been challenging because people, especially if people are going to hire you, they want to really put you in a box.
This guy's got a
Um,
PhD in rhetoric. Trust me, interdisciplinary is my thing.
um, that's awesome. Yeah, so I feel like to me, I'm so happy moving between different things. And when it's something I care about, I don't care what it comes out to be. And I wish there was more acceptance of that. And I do think that that's what's exciting about Marcel the Shell is just that that project is very interdisciplinary. Like it has so many different facets of creation went into making it happen. And so I feel like it was a it feels like it was a really exciting project for me to be a part of because it feels like the first time that my interdisciplinarity is being celebrated rather than like pitted against me. um yeah, I mean, I love being creative. I don't really care how I'm doing it. I love being creative.
I do, before I let you go, I do want to circle back to Marcel the Shell, because one of the things, and you mentioned it way early on when we were talking, was the individual videos that were done before and how you took that world and expanded upon it. And what was that process like, and how did it work?
Um it was actually fairly simple. It was sort of like if you work with anything that has source material or just treating it almost as its own kind of like script or, you know, ingredient in the pot. And I think Dean is a really like meticulous filmmaker, and so he was very clear on what from that he sort of wanted to hold on to. um and so again, like a lot of that was really just like rules of the world. And like, I think it would be very easy to make Marcel kind of live in a world that's really cute and really like, oh, we just took some clay and made an adorable little flower pot that sits next to his, lounge chair. But I think the thing that really resonates with people about Marcel is that it's not like that. It's actually all the things that are with him are sort of like junk that people forgot about in their house, and feels like stuff pulled from our world. So it has sort of this low fantasy, relatable quality. And I think that was the most important thing that we took from the shorts.
I can't thank you enough for the way in which you talk about movies. Because my research in my day job is in narrative and stories and those kinds of things, and the way in which you talk about world building, and it's one of the hardest things to get across to students and those kinds of things. When they're telling a story, you can teach people how to use a camera, you can teach people how to use lights, but teaching them that what they're building is a world on screen, it's one of the hardest and most difficult things to get across. And I really appreciate how immersed you are in the ways in which you talk about these things. It's amazing. Your sense of narrative is really wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. Yeah, no, I love talking about this stuff. And I do think like I wish that someone had said to me, like when I was a film student, some of the things that me after doing this for a while have said, not to put it on a pedestal, but just that, I think like sometimes pedagogy can be very didactic and just sort of be like, make, a Hitchcock movie or whatever. And it's like, oh, I'm a film student, I don't have those means. And also maybe that's not my interest, is for it to look like that. So I think like the more you can like train yourself to just like think about the things you do have access to and like how your own world works and how you can kind of put that together, I think that will always be your strength. And that's also what makes it like true to who you are.
So we've covered a fair bit of terrain, and I really appreciate all the time you've given us. But I always have to ask at the end, what did I forget to ask?
You asked me really amazing questions. What did you forget to ask? I don't know. I mean, I feel like this was like pretty in depth. Only if you have anything else you want to ask me. I don't feel like there's
honestly, talking with you has been great. I could go all day, and I know that we're carving up a period from your day, and I don't want to take too much, but this has been really wonderful. I thank you so much for being willing to do this. Well, out here in Indiana, the invention of Zoom has been great for movies because we get to have conversations with people like you that we wouldn't get to have otherwise, and so. I'm really thankful for you being willing to do this and take some time with us.
I think it's so awesome. And I feel like the people in your audience are so fortunate that you thought to include somebody like me, because I feel like sometimes the invisible people behind things, that's sort of what cracks this kind of stuff open for you, rather than just, an actor or director that you're used to hearing speak. So I think it's really informative to hear like from all different voices behind the camera.
Absolutely. We are so fortunate to have you. And honestly, if your magic show comes through the Midwest, please look us up. When the feature is done, if you're looking for a place to screen it, please look us up.
Thank you so much. I would love that.
We will be looking out for all of your artistry as you continue on.